I thought the hardest part of being a nurse was watching strangers take their last breath in the ICU. I was wrong. The hardest part was standing in the county recorder's office in downtown Columbus, Ohio, watching a clerk zoom in on a screen that officially declared my very much alive father as deceased. My name is Sarah. For 4 years, I've worked 12-hour night shifts at Riverside Methodist Hospital while caring for my dad, Arthur. Dad is 72. He has Parkinson's, which slows his body down, but his mind is as sharp as a tack. He still solves the Sunday crossword in ink and beats me at chess every single weekend. When his mobility started failing, I moved into his house on Maplewood Drive to make sure he took his meds, got to physical therapy, and kept his independence. I sacrificed my social life, my sleep, and my career advancement because I love him. That's just what you do for family. Or at least, that's what I thought. My younger sister, Chloe, lived 30 minutes away in Dublin. Chloe was the family dazzler. She worked in commercial real estate, drove a leased Audi she couldn't afford, and only popped by Dad's house when she needed something. Usually money. Usually framed as a quick loan for a business opportunity. Dad, being the soft-hearted father he is, always gave in. But lately, as Dad's physical care became more demanding, Chloe stopped visiting altogether. She said the smell of hospital equipment made her anxious. Then, 3 weeks ago, something shifted. Chloe started showing up unannounced. Not to help with Dad's bathing or meals, but to rifle through his mail on the kitchen counter. She'd linger by his antique roll-top desk where he kept his personal files. Whenever I walked into the room, she'd snap the drawer shut and give me this tight, artificial smile. Honestly, I was too exhausted from my hospital shifts to push it. I figured she was just being her usual self-absorbed self. Until a Tuesday afternoon when I tried to refinance the property taxes on Dad's home to lower his monthly payments. I had his power of attorney for healthcare and finances, drafted legally 3 years ago. But when the tax assessor's office flagged the file, the clerk looked at me with genuine pity. She told me the home was no longer listed under Arthur Miller's name. A quitclaim deed had been filed 2 weeks prior. The document stated that Arthur Miller had passed away on May 12th, and full ownership of the $450,000 property had been transferred directly to Chloe. Attached to the filing was a certified death certificate bearing Dad's name, social security number, and a forged signature from a local probate judge. I stood frozen in the drafty government building, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Dad was sitting in his favorite recliner right now, sipping Earl Grey tea and listening to jazz. I leaned over the counter, my voice barely a whisper. I asked the clerk who had submitted the notarized paperwork in person. She scanned the bottom of the intake log and read the name aloud. It wasn't just Chloe. The clerk read the name off the official intake log, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't just Chloe who had signed off on the filing. Right beside her name was the official stamp and signature of Marcus Vance, a local notary, and a man I knew personally. Marcus was Chloe's ex-fiancé, a guy who had spent years trying to get back into her good graces after their ugly breakup back in 2021. He ran a small title insurance firm over in Grandview Heights. Looking back, it all started making a sick kind of sense. Chloe had the motive, but Marcus had the legal seal and the access to official state stamps. Together, they had manufactured a paper trail that erased my father's existence with the stroke of a pen. I left the county recorder's office with my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock my Honda Civic. My nurse's brain kicked into high gear, the same way it does during a code blue in the ICU. When panic sets in, you don't scream. You stabilize. You check vital signs. You gather facts. I drove straight back to Maplewood Drive. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Dad sitting on the front porch in his favorite sweater, holding a mug of tea. The afternoon sun was hitting his face, catching the slight tremor in his left hand. He looked up and gave me that warm, familiar smile that always made a long shift feel worth it. "Hey kiddo," he said, his voice gravelly but clear. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard, forcing a gentle smile onto my face. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. The stress alone could trigger a massive Parkinson's flare-up, or worse, a cardiac event. I had to protect his heart while I fought for his life. "Just a long day at the office, Dad," I said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "How's the crossword coming?" "Stuck on 7 across," he chuckled. 8-letter word for betrayal. The word hit me like a physical punch. I had to look away so he wouldn't see the tears brimming in my eyes. That night, after Dad went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and began my own investigation. As a nurse, I'm trained to document everything meticulously. Every dose, every time, every symptom. Now, I was applying those same skills to my own sister. I pulled up our family's shared bank account records, the ones tied to Dad's living trust. That's when I noticed the second anomaly. Small, calculated transfers had been made over the last 90 days. $2,000 here, $1,500 there. All transferred to an LLC registered under the name Vance and Associates Real Estate. Chloe hadn't just taken the house. She was actively draining Dad's life savings to fund whatever sinking real estate venture she and Marcus were running. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and called a civil attorney recommended by one of our hospital's legal risk managers. His name was Mr. Callahan, a sharp, veteran lawyer who specialized in elder law and financial fraud. He listened quietly as I laid out the quitclaim deed, the fake death certificate, and the fraudulent bank transfers. "Sarah," Mr. Callahan said, his tone grim. "If what you're telling me is accurate, this isn't just a family dispute. This is felony grand theft and forgery. But we need to act carefully. If Chloe realizes you're onto her, she could attempt to liquidate the house or take out a hard money loan against the title before we freeze the assets." "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice steady. "We need undeniable proof of your father's mental competence and physical life, documented by certified professionals, before we file the emergency injunction," he instructed. "And we need to catch Marcus in an illegal act of notarization." I spent the next 48 hours executing the plan. I scheduled an immediate, comprehensive cognitive evaluation for Dad at the Ohio State Neurological Center. The head of neurology spent 3 hours testing Dad's memory, reasoning, and executive function. The final report was crystal clear. Arthur Miller possessed 100% cognitive capacity and full legal competence. With that certified medical record in my hands, I felt a surge of strength. I was ready to confront the situation legally. If you've ever watched greed tear a family apart, let me know in the comments. The next morning, I drove over to Marcus Vance's office in Grandview Heights under the guise of dropping off some standard property insurance forms for Dad. I wore my scrubs, keeping my composure professional and neutral. When Marcus walked into the lobby, he looked noticeably tense. He smoothed down his tie, offering me an uneasy smile. "Hey, Sarah," he said, clearing his throat. "What brings you by?" "Just clearing up some paperwork for Dad's house," I said smoothly, pulling a document out of my tote bag. "I saw your stamp on a deed transfer from 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to ask you a quick question about it." Marcus's face drained of all color. He took a step back toward his desk, his eyes darting toward the hallway. I don't know what document you're talking about," he stammered, his voice tight. "That's funny," I said, holding up a certified copy of the filing. "Because according to the seal, you notarized my father's signature on May 12th. But on May 12th, my father was in the hospital receiving physical therapy, and you were sitting right here." Before Marcus could answer, the door behind him opened, and Chloe walked out holding a stack of closing folders. She froze when she saw me standing there. But instead of looking guilty, her eyes narrowed, and a cold, arrogant smirk spread across her face. "You're too late, Sarah," Chloe said calmly, crossing her arms. "The title company already wired the funds." Chloe stood in the quiet lobby of Marcus's real estate office, looking at me with total indifference. The title company already wired the funds, she repeated, her voice deadpan. We took out a hard money equity loan against the property. $250,000. It cleared this morning. My jaw tightened, but I kept my breathing slow and deliberate. Years of working cardiac arrests in the ICU taught me that when someone tries to create chaos, your greatest strength is absolute composure. Chloe, you filed a fraudulent deed, I said, keeping my voice steady. You lied to the county. You used a fake death certificate. That isn't just taking money. That's a federal crime. Good luck proving that, Chloe said, letting out a sharp, mocking laugh. Dad's old. He has Parkinson's. Everyone knows his memory is shot. If this goes to court, Marcus and I will just say Dad signed the transfer voluntarily last month and forgot about it because of his dementia. Who is a judge going to believe? A certified notary or a sick old man who can barely hold a fork? Marcus shifted uncomfortably behind her, his eyes darting toward the glass front doors. He looked like a man who was suddenly realizing he'd jumped off a cliff with a lead parachute. Chloe, maybe we should, Marcus started to whisper. Shut up, Marcus, she snapped, not taking her eyes off me. Sarah won't do anything. She's too soft. She's always played the devoted, dutiful daughter while I actually built a business. Dad owes me this money. He's been favoring you for years, giving you his time, letting you live in his house. I live there to take care of him, Chloe. I said, the anger finally bubbling to the surface. I cook his meals, clean his sheets, manage his medications, and drive him to physical therapy 3 times a week. You only show up when you need a payout. Well, now I got mine, she said, pulling a set of keys out of her designer handbag. And by the way, I listed the house with an estate buyer. They're coming by on Friday to appraise the furniture. You have 48 hours to pack your stuff and find Dad a cheap nursing home. She turned on her heel and walked toward the back offices, her heels clicking loudly against the polished hardwood floor. Marcus gave me one last terrified look before following her and slamming the heavy oak door shut behind them. I stood in the quiet lobby, my hands clenching into tight fists. My entire body was shaking with rage. She wasn't just stealing money. She was trying to strip our father of his home, his dignity, and his reputation, all while trying to frame him as mentally incompetent. I walked out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and took 5 deep, slow breaths. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Callahan. Mr. Callahan, they just pulled $250,000 out on an equity loan, I said, my voice cold as ice. And she's claiming Dad has dementia to cover her tracks. I was afraid of that, Mr. Callahan replied calmly. Here's what we do next, Sarah. We don't argue with her. We don't threaten her. We hit them with an emergency petition for an injunction and quiet title in the Franklin County Common Pleas Court. But to shut down her dementia claim permanently, we need something undeniable. What do you mean? I need your father to step into a lawyer's office tomorrow morning, in front of a neutral court reporter and an independent medical evaluator, and give a recorded deposition, he explained. We need him on video, answering complex financial questions, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is 100% mentally sound. My heart sank. Asking my dad to sit through an intense legal interrogation while fighting his physical tremors was a lot. But it was the only way to save his life's work. That evening, I sat down next to Dad in the living room. I made him a fresh cup of tea, sat on the ottoman across from his recliner, and gently took his trembling hand in mine. Dad, I said softly, I need to tell you something serious. And I need you to stay calm. I explained everything. I told him about the quitclaim deed, the fake death certificate, Marcus's fraudulent stamp, and the equity loan. I watched his face closely, terrified that the shock would overwhelm him. Dad sat completely still for a long moment. He looked down at his trembling hand, then looked back up at me. His eyes weren't filled with confusion. They were filled with a sharp, burning clarity. "She thinks I'm helpless, doesn't she?" Dad said, his voice quiet but surprisingly steady. "Dad, I am so sorry." "Don't apologize, Sarah," he interrupted, squeezing my hand back with impressive strength. "Call the lawyer. Tell him I'll be there at 8 in the morning." The next day, we arrived at the law firm downtown. Dad was dressed in his sharpest Sunday suit, his hair combed neatly, looking every bit the proud former high school principal he was. Mr. Callahan had set up a conference room with a video camera, a certified court reporter, and Dr. Vance, an independent forensic psychiatrist hired to evaluate Dad's mental competence in real time. For 2 hours, Dr. Vance grilled my father. He asked him about historical events, complex mathematical calculations, his current financial holdings, and the exact details of his medical care. Dad didn't hesitate once. He answered every question with precision, warmth, and unmistakable clarity. When the evaluation finished, Dr. Vance turned off the recording equipment, looked at Mr. Callahan, and signed a sworn affidavit on the spot, confirming Dad's complete legal capacity. "We have everything we need for the emergency hearing on Friday," Mr. Callahan said, slapping the file folder shut. "Chloe and her buyer won't know what hit them." On Friday morning, I drove Dad to the house on Maplewood Drive. Chloe's leased Audi was already parked in the driveway, along with a sleek black SUV belonging to the estate appraisal company. Through the front window, I could see Chloe standing in our living room, gesturing wildly at Dad's antique furniture while talking to a man in a business suit. Dad straightened his tie, looked at me, and nodded. We walked up the front steps, and I unlocked the door. When the front door swung open, the appraiser looked up. Chloe spun around, a cruel remark clearly ready on the tip of her tongue. But the words completely caught in her throat. Her face drained of all color, and her eyes went wide with absolute horror as she stared directly at the man standing right beside me. Chloe stood frozen in the middle of our living room, her mouth half open. The color had completely drained from her face. She looked like she had just seen a dead man walking. "Dad," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. Dad didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush toward her. He simply walked into his own home, relying lightly on his cane, and stopped directly across from her. "Hello, Chloe," Dad said softly. "I hear you've been telling people I'm no longer with us." The estate appraiser looked back and forth between Chloe and Dad, clearly catching the deep tension in the room. "Wait a minute," the appraiser said, frowning as he pulled out his digital tablet. "Miss Miller, you told our firm that the owner of this property passed away in May, and that you were the sole legal heir executing the estate sale." I can explain," Chloe stammered, her hands visibly trembling as she dropped her clipboard onto the coffee table. "There was a miscommunication with the probate paperwork." "There was no miscommunication," I interrupted, stepping forward. I pulled a sealed manila envelope from my bag and handed a set of documents directly to the appraiser. "This is a certified medical affidavit signed yesterday by the chief of neurology at Ohio State, confirming my father's 100% mental capacity. And this is a formal notice of fraud. My father is very much alive, and he never signed this house over to anyone." The appraiser took one look at the paperwork, his expression darkening instantly. "We're done here," he said firmly, packing up his tablet. "I'm canceling this contract immediately, and our legal team will be contacting your office, Chloe." He hurried out the front door, slamming it shut behind him. The silence left in the room was deafening. Chloe slammed her purse onto the kitchen counter, her panic suddenly twisting into pure fury. She glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Sarah? Coming in here with your medical reports and playing the hero. I needed that money. Marcus and I were days away from losing our firm. So you decided to declare your own father dead?" I asked, my voice tight with emotion. "You forged a judge's signature, Chloe. You stole his life savings. You tried to throw him into a home. He doesn't need a $400,000 house, she shrieked, tears finally spilling over her mascara. He's 72. He's sick. What was he going to do with it anyway? You were just going to let it sit here while I lost everything I worked for. Dad stood there quietly listening to his youngest daughter justify destroying his life. I saw a tear slip down his weathered cheek, but his posture remained straight and dignified. Chloe, Dad said, his voice trembling slightly from the emotional toll. I would have helped you. If you were in trouble, all you had to do was ask me. I've spent my whole life protecting you girls. But you didn't ask. You tried to erase me. Oh, save the speech, Dad. Chloe snapped, grabbing her purse and storming toward the front door. This isn't over. The equity loan already cleared. The money is in an offshore corporate account. You can't touch it. She yanked the door open and sprinted down the porch steps toward her Audi, kicking up gravel as she sped away into the afternoon traffic. I turned to Dad, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. Are you okay? I am, Dad said, taking a deep breath as he patted my hand. Because I have you, Sarah. Now, let's finish this the right way. 10 minutes later, Mr. Callahan met us at the Franklin County Courthouse. Armed with our emergency petition, the neurological evaluation, and the official police report I had filed earlier that morning, we stepped into the judge's chambers for an expedited hearing. Judge Patricia Evans sat behind her desk, reviewing the file in front of her. As she scanned the fake death certificate alongside Dad's live deposition video playing on Mr. Callahan's laptop, her face turned to stone. This is one of the most brazen acts of title fraud I have ever seen, Judge Evans said, her voice dripping with indignation. She signed an immediate, temporary emergency order freezing all bank accounts associated with Chloe Miller and Marcus Vance, blocking any transfer of the equity loan funds, and issuing a stay of execution on the fraudulent deed. Mr. Callahan, Judge Evans said, handing back the signed order. Notify the prosecutor's office and the State Notary Oversight Board immediately. I want Marcus Vance's license revoked by end of day. We walked out of the courthouse feeling a massive weight lift off our shoulders. We had stopped the sale. We had frozen the money. The law was finally working. Or so I thought. When I drove back to Maplewood Drive that evening to make Dad dinner, I noticed something strange sitting on the front porch. It was a bright yellow notice from the county sheriff's office, taped right over the deadbolt lock. I pulled the bright yellow paper off the front door, my stomach dropping. It was an official notice of immediate eviction and asset seizure. But it didn't name my father. It was addressed to Chloe, and it had been issued by a private hard money lending company out of Cleveland. Looking back, Chloe hadn't just taken out a standard equity loan. To get the cash fast without standard bank verification, she had gone to a predatory hard money lender, putting up our father's house as collateral under her fraudulent title. Because she hadn't made the first balloon payment, the lenders had filed an expedited private foreclosure notice. They were coming to change the locks and seize the property in less than 72 hours. What is that, Sarah? Dad asked, coming out onto the porch with his walker. Just a notice from the county, I lied quickly, tucking the paper into my coat pocket. Nothing to worry about, Dad. Let's get you inside. I couldn't let him panic. But inside, my blood was running hot. Chloe's desperation had set off a chain reaction that was moving faster than the court's frozen order could track. I called Mr. Callahan immediately from the back patio while Dad watched the evening news. Mr. Callahan, a hard money lender, just posted an eviction notice on the door, I said, my voice tense. They're claiming ownership through Chloe's fraudulent deed. Those hard money lenders move fast, Sarah, Mr. Callahan warned. They don't check details, they just grab assets. The frozen bank accounts stop Chloe, but we need an emergency court order to quiet title to stop this private firm from kicking your father out on Friday. How long will that take? We have to present the evidence to Judge Evans in an open hearing tomorrow morning, he said. and Chloe and Marcus will be subpoenaed to attend. If they don't show up, a bench warrant will be issued for their arrest. That night, I barely slept. I sat up in the living room, watching over my dad while he slept peacefully in his bedroom. I looked at the family photos on the mantle, pictures of Chloe and me when we were little, sitting on Dad's shoulders at the county fair. It broke my heart to think about how a little bit of money and a lot of greed could completely erase 30 years of sisterhood. The next morning at 9 a.m., we walked into room 402 of the Franklin County Courthouse. The courtroom was quiet, the heavy wooden pews filled with court clerks, bailiffs, and 2 representatives from the hard money lending firm. At the front defense table sat Chloe and Marcus. Marcus looked like a nervous wreck. His tie was crooked, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was wringing his hands repeatedly. Chloe, on the other hand, sat with her chin up, dressed in a sharp blazer, still trying to project an air of complete innocence. Judge Evans took her seat on the bench and banged her gavel. "We are here in the matter of Miller versus Miller and Vance, regarding fraudulent title conveyance and unauthorized encumbrance of real property," Judge Evans announced, her stern eyes sweeping across the courtroom. "Mr. Callahan, present your case." Mr. Callahan stood up calmly, placing a thick black binder on the podium. "Your Honor, we present clear evidence that Chloe Miller and Marcus Vance engaged in systemic identity theft, forgery of a judicial signature, and fraudulent notarization," Mr. Callahan stated. "We have the live testimony of Mr. Arthur Miller, who is sitting right here in this courtroom, as well as sworn medical affidavits proving his full mental capacity." Chloe's attorney stood up quickly. "Your Honor, my client maintains that Mr. Arthur Miller verbally agreed to the transfer." "Quiet down, counselor," Judge Evans interrupted, holding up her hand. She turned her sharp gaze directly toward Marcus Vance. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, her voice like steel. "As a licensed state notary public, did you personally witness Arthur Miller sign this quitclaim deed on May 12th? Marcus paled. He looked at Chloe, then at the judge, sweating profusely under his collar. I. Marcus stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of a potential felony perjury charge. He took a shaky breath, looked down at his hands, and whispered something that made Chloe snap her head around in absolute shock. "I didn't see him sign it," Marcus confessed, his voice barely audible in the quiet courtroom. "Chloe told me he gave verbal consent over the phone. She promised me a cut of the loan to pay off my business debts if I just stamped the paperwork." Chloe gasped, snapping her head toward him. "Marcus, you coward," she yelled, slamming her hands down on the defense table. Judge Evans struck her gavel hard against the wooden block. "Order in the court. Miss Miller, sit down and keep quiet, or I will have you held in contempt immediately." Chloe fell back into her chair, her face flushed red with humiliation as every eye in the courtroom fixed upon her. "Your Honor," Mr. Callahan continued calmly, stepping toward the bench. "We also submit security footage from Riverside Methodist Hospital, where my client, Sarah Miller, works. On May 12th, the exact date recorded on the deed, Mr. Arthur Miller was in the outpatient therapy center receiving physical rehabilitation for 3 hours. He was miles away from Mr. Vance's office." Judge Evans reviewed the video timestamp and the notarized log side by side. The contrast between truth and deceit was undeniable. "The evidence before this court is overwhelming," Judge Evans declared, her tone sharp and uncompromising. "I am immediately issuing an order to void the quitclaim deed, restoring full, unencumbered ownership of the property at 1420 Maplewood Drive to Mr. Arthur Miller. Furthermore, I am declaring the equity loan fraudulent, stripping the hard money lender's lien from the title." The lender's legal team quickly stood up, gathering their documents and nodding in agreement with the judge's swift decision. They knew trying to enforce a mortgage built on forged documents was a losing battle. Judge Evans turned her attention back to Chloe and Marcus, her gaze piercing. "As for you, Mr. Vance, the judge said, your notary commission is revoked immediately, and I am referring this matter to the Franklin County prosecutor for criminal charge consideration, including forgery and filing false public records. And Miss Miller, your actions constitute grand theft and elder financial exploitation. Bailiffs, please escort both defendants to the holding area while formal charges are processed. 2 uniformed bailiffs stepped forward. Chloe's confident demeanor completely shattered. As the metal handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she looked over at our father, her eyes filled with panic and real tears. Dad, please. Chloe sobbed as she was led away. Tell them to stop. I'm sorry. I was desperate. Dad sat quietly in the front row. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He simply looked at her with a mix of deep sadness and firm resolve. I love you, Chloe, Dad said softly, his voice echoing in the courtroom. But you need to take responsibility for what you've done. We watched as the bailiffs led her through the side doors. The legal battle over the house was finally over, but the emotional wreckage was going to take much longer to clear. If you enjoy emotional real-life stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. When we stepped out onto the courthouse steps, the cool afternoon breeze blew through the trees. Dad stopped at the top of the stone stairs, taking a long, deep breath of the fresh air. He held onto his cane with one hand and took my arm with the other. Let's go home, Sarah, he said, offering a tired but peaceful smile. I think I have a crossword puzzle to finish. I smiled back, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over me. We drove back to Maplewood Drive, the house looking warmer and brighter than it had in weeks. 6 months later, the legal process reached its final conclusion. Marcus Vance agreed to a plea deal that resulted in probation and the complete loss of his title business. Chloe was sentenced to 2 years in a state facility for financial elder abuse and forgery, along with the court order for full restitution of the stolen bank funds. It was a painful chapter for our family, but it brought accountability where it was desperately needed. Today, Dad is doing well. His physical therapy is progressing, and his living room remains a place of safety, warmth, and peace. Sitting on his front porch with him every evening, watching the sunset, reminds me of the most important truth I learned through all of this. Greed can tear a family apart, but truth always leaves a paper trail. The people who truly love you protect your dignity, not your property. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our story today. If this journey moved you or resonated with your own experiences, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. We read every single one. Remember to always stand up for the people you love, hold on to your integrity, and never be afraid to pursue what is right. Take care, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.